Okay, so welcome to what is a video essay on Psycho 3, directed back in 1986. I can't believe it's nearly 40 years old. Directed by Norman Bates himself, Anthony Perkins. Now, the video essay does come with spoilers, of course, so just a little warning there, but I hope you enjoy it. When Anthony Perkins was promoting his directorial debut, Psycho 3, in the US summer of 1986, the Late Show host David Letterman quipped that the film's title sounded somewhat like dog food. The joshing may have been in good spirits, but it was a joke that couldn't help but hold a contextual punch. For punters who, 3 years earlier, had balked at the sight of a 2 positioned alongside the title of a revered film, the addition of another Roman numeral, and all that this implied, was something to deride or pretend had not occurred. Fortunately, on an artistic level, Psycho 3 acquits itself well, and a joke on canine culinaries would fit right in with the film's mischievous impulses, although in many respects the film needs to be taken strictly on its own terms. The creative team of Perkins and writer Charles Edward Pogue have played up the psychological angst and played down the suspense, the latter of which was the principal hallmark of the 1960 original and its 2 decades later sequel, but surely would have proven a case of diminishing returns by a third film. The trade-off, though, is a good one, with the film transporting us beyond the arched window of the Bates house to show Norman and Mother conversing, up close and personal, and engaged in an ongoing, grasping, but fairly unequal battle of wills. It's all eerily rendered by cinematographer Bruce Surtees, whose skill in painting with darkness and shadows earned him, along with The Godfather's cinematographer Gordon Willis, the moniker Prince of Darkness. The film also gives us a string of characters in desperate need of redemption, one of whom is Norman. Notably also, the jolts of suspense have been largely replaced with the jolts of the macabre, a hallucination of human taxidermy, a furtive kiss for a dead girl, the dismemberment of a stuffed corpse, another man planting a kiss on Mother, and so on. The film takes us into the more ghoulish details that the previous films were suggestive of, rather than displayed, and it accompanies such with the blackest of humour. If Psycho 2 was a tribute to the method of Psycho, Psycho 3 harnesses the bold, direct, gleefully macabre mindset of Hitchcock's Frenzy. Granted, Psycho had its thread of black humour, and Psycho 2 its in-jokes, but such elements flow liberally through Psycho 3's veins. Perkins and Pogue, though, often use the jokes as a segue to the melancholy. Black comedy and sadness not only bounce off one another, but practically feed one another's lines. The pitifulness of characters' predicaments may generate a smile, but never a smirk. Perkins and Pogue have a clear feeling for outsiders. And it's a laugh of recognition at our own desperate little struggles, and that we can locate our struggles in those of a psychopathic killer has always been one of the fascinating, if not confronting, conceits of the Psycho films. Which leads to a central point of these reflections. Psychos 2, 3 and 4, the beginning, are typically appraised as potboilers that, while stylish, do not hold a candle to the subtextual and thematic richness of the original. But where the sequels, in particular 3, resonate, and resonate strongly, is in their implicit message. If we refrain from being so damned crass and opportunistic with the more sensitive members of our communities, who are themselves barely keeping their own demons at bay, so much of this tragic stuff wouldn't hit the fan. Yes, we may feel, both logically and empathically, that the grief-stricken Lila Loomis of Psycho II has reason to act to ensure that the man who took her sister's life so violently is recommitted. But given what we already know of the demons that afflict Norman, we also wish she could just sit with and process her feelings. And in Psycho III, the desperate attempts for recognition that drive Jeff Fahey's drifter Duke and Roberta Maxwell's reporter Tracy are easy enough to relate to, but when they're seeking this through Norman's notoriety, they overwhelmingly come off as bullies. And in the moment when Mother spectacularly materialises behind Tracy, our first real close-up of the embodied mother, and what a great one, it's hard not to be swept up in Mother's mocking proclamation, "Why can't you leave my son, my poor Norman, alone?" As Perkins has emphasised, the Psycho films are tragedies at heart, with Norman the Hamlet of horror. Psycho introduced the idea of the sensitive, feminine-identified man as dangerous, but Psychos 2, 3 and 4 assert their own distinct identity through a genuinely sympathetic rendering of the Norman Bates character. In Psycho 3, of course, Norman has an ally in Diana Scarwood's fallen nun, Maureen. Maureen likewise has an ally in Norman. Both are seeking redemption for past sins. Maureen articulates this at points throughout the film, while we, the audience, can identify Norman's need through his escalating tensions with Mother. The interactions between Norman and Maureen are touching, although always laced with a fatalism. The wish for Norman to be left alone also extends to Maureen. Their version of desperation is a heartening rebuke to the more predatory version on display with Duke and Tracy. Although in this scorched, cynical world, you always assume Duke and Tracy's way will prevail. Not entirely the case though, as it pans out. Maureen's involvement at the Bates Motel leads to the film's most memorable switcheroo on established tropes. Maureen hallucinates that Mother, pulling back the shower curtain, is in fact the Virgin Mary. It's the sort of moment where the filmmakers are veering so close to melodramatic hilarity, like the aforementioned close-up of Mother, and another moment where the camera follows a crazed Norman for an extended period of time, that the success and the daring of these moments is quite the joy to behold. It is in these moments more than any that you can celebrate Perkins' directorial influence. He has the confidence with the material to take it to extreme points. Some of the touches might have been too left field to attract the amount of bums on seats that had enjoyed the previous films, but you at least have another authentic Psycho film. As for his performance, you could entertain the notion that Perkins was evoking a degree of the spirit of his manic man of God from 1984's Crimes of Passion. This is a supremely jittery Norman Bates. More concretely though, Perkins as actor is simply responding to the scenarios of Psycho 3's narrative. It's as though the reinstitution of Mother in Norman's life has twisted him into a regressive state, even beyond the young man we first met in 1960. This cowed older man is almost comically incapable of not drawing suspicion upon himself, and, not so comically, his potentiality for meaningful relationships with the world of the living appears even more thwarted, which makes his moments of connection with Maureen semi-triumphant. Whatever the tone of his performance, Perkins is a pleasure to watch. The spectre of Crimes of Passion is also felt in the visual glow of neon, So vibrant in the Hollywood boulevard of crimes, and now casting a series of peculiar glows across the darkness of a desert motel. The murkiness of crimes, meanwhile, is felt in touches such as the pornography adorning Duke's walls and the character's sleazy but humorous sexual rendezvous with the film's first victim. For some, the sleaze was off-putting and felt to be a lowering addition to the Psycho legacy. Although Pogue had envisaged Duke as a red herring, the psychological preoccupations of this instalment rarely accommodate anyone but Mother as a suspect for murder, an impression solidified by composer Carter Burwell's introduction of unsettling vocals and ethereal choirs to the Psycho soundscape, effectively emphasising the in-his-head psychology of the piece. Psycho III was released in the era of the slasher film, but Perkins, by most accounts, was philosophical towards the studio pressures of the day, such as amping up the visceral impact of the murders and adding a De Palma-esque final stinger. The stinger, the revelation that Norman has not completely separated with Mother in both a literal and figurative sense, will, I suspect, always be viewed as a cynical setup for Psycho IV, particularly as it seems to negate Norman's victory over his psychosis. But does it? The stinger might represent another grab at the macabre and is certainly played to unnerving effect, but Norman at least now appears on more relaxed terms with Mother. Why should he give up her company entirely after the enormity of their struggles? Has she not ever provided comfort for a lost soul? We always make exceptions for the murderous Norman Bates and wish him well.